guys, I've just watched both episodes of Behind the Ropes, which I was actually able to see on my Facebook page. Somebody had posted it on Facebook. If you want to watch it, I believe the episodes are available on Sky On Demand, if you've got access to that. I'm afraid I don't have a link to it before anyone asks, but yeah, it's available on Sky On Demand. I'm sure if you're savvy with your social media, you can track it down. But I watched it in the form of two separate episodes, which were circa half an hour long. One focused on Charles Martin, one focused on Anthony Joshua. And look, I'm a boxing nut, as you guys know. I lap this stuff up. It's fair to say that I would watch stuff like this all day and all night if it was made. You know, I'm the kind of guy who buys into this sort of thing. So please don't perceive any of the comments I make as necessarily criticism of the fact that this was made. You know, I would much rather have this made and have stuff like this to watch than have to watch EastEnders or something like that. So don't get me wrong on that front. What I'm talking about here is in the context of boxing programming and in the context of build up to other fights. This one has slightly failed to grab me. I mean, we'll come on to that in a bit more detail. And clearly this is a very, very good fight. You know, I'm really looking forward to this fight. Take away the belt, you know, even take away the belt. This is a really, really intriguing matchup between two very, very, very good fighters who, I guess you could say, are both still largely unproven. So, you know, it's interesting programming. Let's start with the Charles Martin episode. We see Charles Martin. There's lots of talk with him and his trainer, and we see various footage of him. You don't really see good training footage, but you see footage of him, you know, in his gym. You see footage of him getting quite a bizarre massage, which was slightly uncomfortable viewing. I don't know if I was the only one who found that, or if other people agree there. Charles Martin's developing quite a good catchphrase, which I like, which is, I walk this earth. You know, I have heard him say that a few times in the lead up to this fight. I walk this earth like a god, or I walk this earth fearing no one. And to be honest, Charles Martin comes across like a nice guy. You know, as I say, I've spoken to Charles offline a few times because he's seen my videos and he sent me a message. And I like Charles Martin. He comes across as a nice guy. But what I will say is, in terms of selling a fight, in terms of hyping an occasion, he is not as engaging a character immediately as a guy like a Dillian Whyte or a David Haye or a Tyson Fury. And I'm not saying he has to be, you know, the old phrase is be yourself, and I'm not saying he should, you know, fake it to make it or anything like that. But what I'm saying is, you watch this documentary and it's interesting. You know, if you're a boxing nut, you lap this stuff up. You know, anything boxing related is good. It doesn't leave you with your pulse rate racing, ready to watch the fight. You know, it doesn't make you count down the days till Saturday night. And you know, when the Joshua Dillian Whyte fight was coming up, I remember 3 or 4 days before that fight, I was waking up thinking, here we go, you know, really, really getting ready for it. And, you know, I'm not necessarily getting that feeling with this fight. I'm getting it from a pure boxing perspective, don't get me wrong. You know, this is going to be a fascinating matchup from that perspective. But I think this fight lacks the hype of the Dillian Whyte fight. And I think part of that is the lack of the sort of WWE style bad blood. And maybe it's a flaw on my character that I do enjoy that sort of thing. But I'm going to admit it, I do enjoy the bad blood in a fight. And it, you know, it does lead for these things to be more entertaining for me. What will be fascinating, however, is how this does in pay-per-view sales. Because when this fight was announced, my initial instinct was that this fight would smash pay-per-view sales. You know, I think they're saying the Dillian Whyte fight did about 450. So I was thinking this would do 6, 7, 800,000. Really on the basis that this was a world title fight. It was a massive, massive step up for Anthony Joshua, and people would buy into the world title fight. And it could go that way. I'm also thinking, did people buy into that last card because of the huge beef between Dillian Whyte and Joshua, and also to a lesser extent between Spike O'Sullivan and Eubank? And did people more get excited for that fight because of the lead up and the banter between Dillian Whyte and Anthony Joshua. And the more I thought about it, it wouldn't actually surprise me if this fight did less pay-per-view buys. It's not got as good an undercard. It's not got a character like Eubank supporting it. Charles Martin may be a better fighter, but he isn't as good a character as Dillian Whyte. And this programming in the lead-up isn't creating that hype and that bad blood that we've seen previously. So I'm not sure how it's going to go. It wouldn't surprise me if it went either way. Wouldn't surprise me at all if this smashes box office records. You know, AJ's clearly a huge draw. But it also wouldn't surprise me if it's a slight disappointment for the Hearns. And it'll be very interesting to see how that plays out. If you're watching, leave your predictions in the comments. How many pay-per-view buys do you think this does approximately? I really can't make up my mind. I could see it being anywhere between like 300 and 800. You know, I really cannot narrow it down. So I'm fascinated to hear people's thoughts on that. But back to the footage. You know, Charles Martin and Anthony Joshua, a consistent theme is you don't see any training footage of any note here. You see the odd bit, but nothing really of note, which is something I always like to see in this. One thing that's interesting about Charles Martin is he genuinely does appear to be a thinking fighter. He genuinely does appear to approach boxing like a game of chess. You know, there's an interesting part where his coach says Charles would always be in the gym when he wasn't supposed to be, and he'd be asking the coaches to run through something that they've done yesterday, and to show him another move that he'd been working on. And you do get the impression from Charles Martin that he is legit a boxing chess player, legit a boxing tactician, you know, someone who sits down, who works out the maths, who works out the angles, and that does correspond to his fighting style. You know, he comes out, has a look at an opponent's. I think he's quite versatile. I think he's got a lot of different strings to his bow as a fighter, and you get that impression from watching this, is he's genuinely a thinking fighter. As I say, he's not an immediately engaging character. He's kind of a sort of laid-back dude type character, which isn't immediately as engaging as like a Dillian Whyte or a David Haye or someone, you know, of that sort of nature. He comes across like a nice guy, don't get me wrong. Not giving the most incisive interviews, I guess you could say. But yeah, he looks like he's putting himself into good shape. He looks like he's training hard. And I think one thing about this is, as you guys know, I'm a massive fan of the Dwyer YouTube channel. I think Dwyer's one of the best boxing channels out there. And I watched the video he did the other day, and he was saying the reason David Haye's come back is David Haye's sat there analysing tape, you know, looking at other fighters, looking at Anthony Joshua and thinking he can win. And to be honest, I think people talk about that too much in boxing. I don't genuinely believe David Haye was sitting there analysing boxing and, you know, looking at angles and seeing how he could work out a way to beat Joshua. I just don't believe that most boxers work like that. But looking at Charles Martin, the way he talks, I wonder if he is one of these rare examples of a fighter who does behave in that manner. You know, he called out Anthony Joshua. A lot of people are thinking it's for a payday, and it may be. You know, it may be. I haven't given my prediction yet. That video will be uploaded in the next day or two. But part of me does wonder if he's a very, very calculated individual, both in the ring and also in the moves outside of the ring. Yeah, the Anthony Joshua portion of the programming, I must say, you know, Joshua, he comes across like a likeable guy. He comes across like a nice guy with a good heart, means well, and you can see that he's being positioned as a definite role model. Sky had him going to the Muhammad Ali exhibition at the O2, and you know, there was certainly some suggestions that maybe one day there'll be an Anthony Joshua exhibition, and you know, trying to compare and contrast the two. And you know, Sky obviously had a lot of media stuff with him, which you'd expect. You know, Joshua, with this fight being in England, is definitely the A side here. He's the big star, so I'm not going to say it's necessarily biased that they had him doing lots of media stuff, photo shoots, filming for the fight promotion, etc. But Joshua comes across well. But again, it's very much the gentle giant Frank Bruno persona. You know, he comes across like a nice guy. He comes across like a guy you could have a conversation with, go out for a beer with. He doesn't necessarily come off as I say, again, I'll use the same terminology as I used to Charles Martin, the most engaging character. You know, Tyson Fury, you might hate him. You might think some of the things he says is ridiculous. But make no mistake, when you listen to him interviewing or being interviewed, you want to see him fight. That may be because you want to see him get his chin knocked off. That may be because you want to see if he can be half as good as some of the stuff he's saying, you know. But Tyson Fury can talk a fight. Tyson Fury can sell an occasion. And with Joshua, I think he needs a foil, if you like. Just like he had in the Dillian Whyte fight. You know, I went to watch Batman versus Superman yesterday. And I think that every good hero needs a villain. You know, Batman and Joker, I don't know. You could give hundreds of examples. But I think Anthony Joshua, nice guy, laid-back guy, versus Charles Martin, nice guy, laid-back guy. It doesn't necessarily make for the biggest occasion. You know, this is a fight that you could say is such a good fight in terms of the way the guys match up. It doesn't need to be hyped. There doesn't need to be fake bad blood. And I get that. I'm not saying we should invent some fake bad blood. I'm just saying with the two personalities involved, I don't think it necessarily propels this fight to the level it could be. You know, the programming here is good. It's shot well. It gives you an insight into both guys. The Charles Martin footage in particular is interesting because, let's be honest, we've seen a few programs like this about Anthony Joshua. We've seen him going back to where he grew up. We've seen him, you know, walking his streets and doing normal things several times before. It's probably not nothing new to you if you're a hardcore boxing fan. The Charles Martin piece will probably be new to you because I doubt too many of us have sat down and watched documentaries about Charles Martin before. You know, so you learn a bit more about the characters involved. You see a bit more about them behind the scenes. It's always interesting. I think personally, I'd give it a 6 out of 10. I think a bit more training footage, a bit more, you know, Jim Axon would have got another mark and a half. A bit more, you know, talking about tactics, talking about weaknesses in their opponent, how they're going to exploit those, would have, again, hit it up a bit more and helped to build this fight and hype it slightly more. But we shall see, we shall see. Let me know your thoughts on this programming. Have you seen it? If you haven't seen it, check it out. As I say, if you've got Sky On Demand, it's there. If you haven't got Sky On Demand, I'm sure there are ways of tracking it down. I don't have a link, unfortunately. But let me know your thoughts, guys. Did you enjoy it? You know, was there any particularly relevant bits that I've missed? Many thanks indeed for watching. If you've enjoyed this, do hit the thumbs up button. If you're new, please do subscribe to the channel. There'll be a prediction video in the next day or two. I'm sure I'll do videos with all the big fight build-up, press conference, weigh-in, fight itself. So hit the subscribe button and join in. Thanks for watching, guys.